Yes, welcome back. Hottest show in the galaxy is the Karen Hunter Show. We are here on Sirius XM Urban View, where talk empowers and becomes action. And I love talking with people who do deep study and then write books and then can talk about things, because as we put together the world story, or even our story, we need to know some things. So let me welcome to the show. He is a historian of the British Empire. He is also the author of The Great Defiance, How the World Took on the British Empire. Let me welcome for the first time, Dr. David Veevers. Hi.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi. So such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for staying up across the pond. It's what is it, like 9:30 at night there?
It's almost 9:30. I've watched Succession. I'm ready for this.
Okay, wait a minute. So that made it across, because two of the actors are from Great Britain, right? So Shiv and Tom are both Brits.
And we see them from very kind of local shows, and then it's suddenly like, that's really jarring that they're on this big US, star-studded show. It's just so weird when we see that kind of thing happen.
And to be clear, Australia is part of the British Empire. Is it?
It was, and it's now obviously still the head of state. Obviously, is the British Crown as well. So it's a slightly complicated, unraveling relationship. But it is indeed. Yeah, that's right.
I feel like everyone's unraveling its relationship with Great Britain. I was saying on the show last week that if the Queen had passed 20 years earlier, she would have gotten such a better. There wouldn't have been protests and things. Had that happened, Charles would have been, even though you guys had off the day of school and things, it was like the rest of the world's like, who cares? Look at his hands. He's trash. Camilla's trash. The monarchy's trash. They should go away. You got Jamaica giving them the middle finger. You got Ireland. You got the Wales giving them their booty to look at. It's the Scottish are like, middle fingers to you. We hate you.
Yeah, but that was good. That was like I think that was a wake up call. We've always seen ourselves with the rest of the world almost through monarchy, like this glorious kind of image that we've got. And I think that her passing was a kind of wake up call that actually, no, people around the world don't share that kind of whitewashed view of the monarchy. And we've got all the trappings over here and all the traditions and the glamour, but actually for large parts of the world, 400 million of whom were once under British rule and suffered. Yeah, it was like oh my gosh, a lot of people actually don't like Britain, and they actually have a serious reckoning with Britain's past in a way that we haven't really had here. So I think that actually started a really important conversation. But it was like you jump on Twitter the next day and it's oh no, everyone hates Britain. Where did that come from? But actually that's been bubbling there for decades.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Veevers, even as you're talking, I'm thinking about, like, America is so immature as a nation. It's a very young nation, and it is really struggling with its history. And its history is so much shorter than Great Britain. So y'all got like maybe close to 700 years of colonization and horrors that, partition and slavery. And like, you got 700 years to reckon with. America's got like a couple of hundred, and it still is struggling through. As a person, and I call people without a lot of melanin, melanemic, as a melanemic person growing up in Great Britain, is it hard for you to reckon with the things that you now know about the nation? Because I'm sure, just like here, you were taught all of the great things and that you discovered everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the kind of, like in the States, that's a massive kind of embittered, very contested conversation that's going on. But I mean, for me, for kind of, a white guy from the south of England, very prosperous area, grew up in school, we didn't actually get taught a lot about our sort of colonial past. And if we did, it was like, Britain abolished the slave trade. But it's like, well, yeah, but also we spent 250 years as the leading slave trader in the whole world. And so we got those sort of cherry-picked lessons in history that you come out thinking, it's like, oh, famine, yes, that was bad, but yeah, we gave the world cricket and the English language and and British education. Doesn't matter that we took those things that already existed and we westernized them. So it's for me in my journey as a historian, a lot of people I speak to, is that gradually the kind of history we taught was just so carefully selected and shaped, and so you've got a whole multiple generations that are growing up in the post kind of imperial world where Britain is now like a third-rate power that has very little influence, especially recently with Brexit and such, that that we have to reckon with that, and we have to kind of if we want these serious relationships with other countries, part of that is that we have to have a reckoning with the legacies of empire, of which in many ways the States is one. Right, you said the States is a young country, I guess constitutionally, but the United States is also a legacy of the British Empire and the systems of slavery and its economic and social structures, and so that I think is almost that's spilt over, and we've left that as a legacy for people in America to grapple with. But as the kind of monster that created these really oppressive hierarchies, racially, economically, socially, I think that we've got a lot to answer for, and we've got a lot of reckoning to do, and I think we're only scratching the surface here. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is because you go in the bookshops today, and all the histories of these still the kind of same histories we've had here for 30, 40 years, this triumphant narrative of what Britain gave to the world, and how it, books like How Britain Made the Modern World, and it's very positive. We gave them democracy and the rule of law, and very little about what we took away from those people, and the impact that we had, and the violence as well. So yes, you can celebrate the abolition of slavery by the British Empire, but you have to recognise that it also trafficked 3.5 million people from West Africa, many of whom died, and that's a conversation that we're really, like in the States, struggling with. Absolutely.
I don't want to even stay there, because I'm like, it is what it is, right? So we're here now. My job on these airwaves is to figure out how people could have freedom, individual freedom, community freedom, and not be oppressed ever again. So in order to do that, I think sometimes we have to deconstruct what happened, right? So the book, The Great Defiance, How the World Took on the British Empire. I'm fascinated that this little tiny island was able to take over the continent of Africa, India. It's like, what the hell? How? You talk Hong Kong, Palestine, I mean, all the way, Uganda, you think about like the vast spread of, and then not even these little 13 colonies that then, had a little revolt, and then kept the same practices, and then like changed around and put an S instead of a C in defense, changed around a few things in the language, to be cute. But like, how did it happen?
I mean, that's been the remarkable story, and I think that's why it has attracted so many people to kind of the history of the British Empire. I mean, the most important question is, I mean, we often focus on the kind of later period, the modern, like the Victorian 19th century, where Britain became, little old Britain, like you said, perched on the northwest, a region of Europe, a bit drab, a bit grey, and then suddenly, within 100 years, a quarter of the world was under British rule. I mean, it's an amazing story, and that's what first attracted me to it. I just thought, wow, what an incredible tale. And so we, traditionally we've looked at things like, the Industrial Revolution, in which Britain was one of the first countries to shift from, mainly agriculture to building things and innovating and embracing technological change that allowed it to build kind of railways and, machine guns and steamships that could traverse the world unlike ever before. And, for a long time, then we also thought along came that was a superior culture, a better understanding of medicine, of science, and that we could then apply that to sort of, civilize, as the language once upon a time was called, and to kind of prepare the rest of the world for that level of civilization. So it's the kind of traditional understanding has been this kind of very exceptional narrative of British superiority, and some of sort of developments in Britain in the 19th century are pretty amazing, like the Industrial Revolution, and some of the scientific and innovative, and even the kind of cultural. If you think about the literature of the 19th century, Dickens, Hardy, and the Bronte sisters, but that's a very kind of now slightly outdated understanding. What I try and do with the book is show actually Britain was trying for about 300 years to conquer the areas that eventually did. And it wasn't easy, and they weren't overwhelmingly successful. And actually, if you take a map of the British Empire by the 20th century, it doesn't necessarily tell us all about their successes. There are big gaping blank areas which Britain never was able to conquer, not through lack of trying, but because they were resisted and they were pushed away. And so
where did they start, Dr. Veevers? What was the first failure? Where did they first try to conquer and weren't able to?
Well, arguably you could say Ireland, because although they did eventually conquer Ireland, it was after about Ireland, which eventually ends up as a British colony, but it took about 600 or 700 years to do so.
Whoa.
But yeah, absolutely. So they start in like the Norman period, when the guys from Normandy come over in 1066, the Battle of Hastings, all of that sort of stuff, and they kind of lash Gaelic Island with Anglo-Norman colonists, and the Irish resist, and 500 years they basically drive the English away, and the English come back and they try again, and through famine and violence they eventually wear the Irish down. But the Irish were never fully conquered, and they resist and they uprose, and then gradually obviously most of Ireland wins its independence back. So that's a kind of good example of, even in success, it wasn't straightforward. But a good example of where they tried but completely failed, lots of places. So Japan is a good example. Japan is in many ways this great success story of avoiding European colonization. One of the few countries in Asia that ever did that. But at the beginning of the 17th century, so the early 1600s, England and other European powers take a real crack at Japan and try and kind of take control of its trade, try and expand Christianity. So it's not through lack of trying.
So I'm just, what's baffling to me?
Yeah.
Why? These people minding their business with their Ginsu knives and, doing all of their shogun, whatever, ninjas, doing what they do. I don't know what they do, right?
Yeah.
Speaking their language, doing their thing, living their lives. Why did Great Britain want to force Christianity of all things, and force them into this car crash? What was the goal? So you control their trade, and then what? You control and dominate them, and then what?
Yeah, and then you profit and you exploit from that, and you outcompete your rivals, especially your European rivals. But what drives them to do it in the first place? I think this is kind of something that's misunderstood. It's not that England or France or the Netherlands were better and more powerful. It comes from a place of weakness. They look around the rest of the world when they begin this, in the 1500s, 1600s, and actually Europe is a pretty poor place. The center of the world is Asia, it's Africa. That's where the world economy, if you open your cupboard, right, everyone's got a cupboard of spices, pepper and cardamom. If you open that little cupboard of yours, 500 years ago, that little cupboard would have been worth its weight in gold. Things like spices drove the world economy. Europe doesn't have spices. It doesn't have gold. It doesn't have silk, all porcelain, all the goods and everything, the rest of the world. So from a place,
so why not just move to these places? Because it was like, if you think about Africa or even India or even China, you're right. It was a spice trade, right? So everyone was trading, right? You got the Africans are trading with the Asians. Everybody for thousands of years, people were just trading. You have something, I have something. So what you're saying is they had nothing to trade, so they just came in and took.
Yeah, so a really good example, I love this one. When the English first go over to India, they turn up, England's biggest export was woolen goods, right? So they turn up with a bunch of woolly jumpers in India where it's 40 degrees and no one wants woolly jumpers, not even at Christmas. And, they're draped in Chinese silk and sumptuous Indian cotton. And the English cannot sell any of their merchandise, and so part of it's from a sense of no one wants what the English are selling. The English have very little wealth or power, and so from that kind of frustration they turn to cultural bigotry and discrimination. They start to kind of cast these people, they kind of other them as being lesser than them and justify their use of violence to try and get
can you just pause for a second, Dr. David Veevers, because the gaslighting right now is stunning. So you come to a place, it's 80, 90 degrees with wool. First of all, I'm questioning your intellect. It's hot. Okay, let's bring wool to a hot place. Okay, that's it. You find out nobody wants what you're selling. You go back home and you devise a plan to tell the world that these people are inferior and they're stupid. Yeah. And then you have guns. So now you can enforce the gaslighting. That's the history. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, it is. And it's a kind of, it's not exceptional to Europe at the time. Like the Chinese were kind of, using stereotypes against the Japanese and so forth. But it's the Europeans that tend to then apply violence to that equation and justify that use of violence. And so they go in from a place of kind of frustration and weakness. And yeah, instead of peacefully trading, and they do that as well, but mostly it ends in violence, and they kind of tend to coerce these people to give them spices or silk or Indian cotton textiles, those kind of things that drove the economy. So yeah, and some of this cultural prejudice is, stunning in the fact that, yeah, it's gaslighting, it's completely bonkers, none of it makes sense. But then you can sort of see them when you go in the archives and read the documents, they're sort of trying desperately to convince themselves. And yeah, it's kind of pathetic, but when they
it
turn
worked
up in
though. But I
streets,
mean, so this is the thing to me, that I'm constantly like, okay, mediocre, not too bright, but they were willing to kill. So brutal, which takes people by surprise, because you're like, well, you gonna kill me over? Okay, I didn't see this coming. Yeah. What, we actually are in chains now? Wait, you put me in a boat? I gotta go. What is happening? Who does this, right? Yeah. And then you devise this system. So I need to know, who was the person, Dr. Veevers, who's the architect of this gaslighting venture that absolutely worked? So they're brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's no individual. I mean, you could sort of shed light on the English crown, for example. The crown we kind of removed the monarchy from our imperial history, but actually back then it was really quite tightly integrated. The crown launches the Royal African Company, which becomes the largest trafficker in people from West Africa, and that's a charter that they launched. They're invested in the company. The Duke of York, who becomes King James II of England, has his initials branded on enslaved people, and so the crown is kind of completely bound up with these colonial enterprises. And there's a lot of really interesting research actually just being done by historians from the States and from the UK on that, which I think is interesting. So usually the kind of crown's been very sanitized and kind of withdrawn. But then, even if you think about Queen Elizabeth II, who had a honeymoon to Prince Philip in Kenya, which was a scene of the Mau Mau uprising and the brutal suppression of the Kenyan people for independence. This is a long bloody history for the crown and colonialism. But so you can look at the crown and their relationship to that. But there's also a whole industry, a whole kind of economy geared towards stereotyping these people and making these cases back home for why we should go over there and invade there or to occupy there. And it's nationwide. It's not a few rotten apples. This is a kind of societal, kind of cultural system.
Yeah. Dr. David Veevers is here. He's the author of The Great Defiance, How the World Took on the British Empire. I learned about the Kenyan part watching The Crown. That's and right. I was sitting there, I was waiting. I was like, as I see little black kids run to get the queen, all of the things. And I'm like, oh, look. And then I'm like, wait a minute, hold up. And she's, oh, hell no. I was like, I'm sitting there angry. I couldn't keep watching it because I was like, this is some bull crap, because you're romanticizing literal, and going to Africa and seeing all these little kids dressed in the little uniforms, speaking English, praying to white Jesus. I'm like, this was effective. Yeah, damn it. I'm speaking English. I'm speaking another language. How did this happen?
It is effective. And that's the thing. It's we may recoil from it, but it was highly effective. And you see echoes in that today with who are now obviously the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Kate. That recently last year they had the tour of the Caribbean, and they're dressed like William's grandparents were 50 years ago when they did those colonial tours, standing up, dressed in all this regalia and waving to, the locals. And it's just, it's these kind of rank kind of colonial tropes that we're still regurgitating. It's widely, publicized in the press. And isn't this wonderful? And you think, hold on, this is, these are, foreign people, these are coming over. These are mostly descendants of enslaved people that were trafficked and funded by these people's ancestors. It's just kind of such a gross relationship. And I think that one of the things, we were speaking about earlier about, with the death of Queen Elizabeth II, is that people are starting, I think, to kind of reevaluate that a bit more.